The Beatles said, "I don't know why you say goodbye, I say hello."
And as we say goodbye to Pat Callahan, he says something else.
Good evening, I'm Pat Callahan.
This is Pat Callahan. On board the Queen Elizabeth in Bar Harbor, I'm Pat Callahan reporting for News Center.
I'm Pat Callahan. At the Kennedy Space Center in Florida, Pat Callahan, News Center.
Live, this is News Center, the Weekend Report. With Pat Callahan.
With 6 Alive outside Dukakis headquarters, I'm Pat Callahan. Good evening, everyone. I'm Pat Callahan. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Pat Callahan.
Good evening. I'm Caroline Cornish.
And I'm Pat Callahan in Manchester, New Hampshire. In Portland, Pat Callahan, News Center. I'm Pat Callahan. Good evening, everyone. I'm Pat Callahan. Good evening, everyone. I'm Pat Callahan. Good evening, everyone. I'm Pat Callahan reporting live in Kennebunkport. But for now, that is it from the State House. I'm Pat Callahan. I'm Pat Callahan. Coming up on News Center, live coverage of the Maine State Republican Convention here at the Augusta Civic Center. I'm Pat Callahan in Manchester. Paul Tsongas is savoring a victory that seemed unlikely just 2 weeks ago. We'll have a live report coming up next on News Center.
Good evening, I'm Pat Callahan.
Your 24-hour News Center. This is the 6 o'clock report.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Pat Callahan. I'm Pat Callahan. In Manchester, New Hampshire, Pat Callahan, News Center.
Good evening, I'm Pat Callahan.
I'm Pat Callahan in Manchester. A live report on the last night of the New Hampshire primary race coming up. I'm Pat Callahan in Washington. Back to you.
Pat Callahan in Washington. Thank you.
Good evening from Washington. I'm Pat Callahan.
For now, I'm Pat Callahan in Washington. Back to you, Cindy.
This is News Center's Voice of the Voter election night coverage, and voters are speaking very clearly tonight. Good evening, I'm Pat Callahan. Good evening, I'm Pat Callahan.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Cindy Williams.
And I'm Pat Callahan.
And I'm Pat Callahan reporting live tonight from our New Hampshire primary headquarters in Manchester.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Cindy Williams.
And I'm Pat Callahan.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Pat Callahan.
Thanks for joining us. I'm Pat Callahan for Joe Cupo and Bruce Glazier. We'll see you again tonight at 11. Have a good evening, everyone.
So it really does say, I'm Pat Callahan.
Yeah, it's not that we can't remember our names. The reason that's there is for the closed captioning.
It's a true story. It says the names in the prompter.
I mostly can't remember my name.
And that's okay. We will never forget that name, however, though.
No.
And after that, hard to believe you are probably only going to hear that phrase 2 more times.